This episode of the In Focus series features Sy Nadji. Sy is the trainer and owner of the William Street Gym, promoter of shows like Rebellion MuayThai and the BOA Super 8 series, and he is also an avid martial artist. Okay, ready?
All right.
December 11th, 2011, Rebellion won. It was your first show, and also it was the first time having your fighter on the promotion as well. I mean, I can only imagine the nerves going through your mind. It's been a crazy week. It would have been one of the last shows of the year. What was it like bringing your own fighter onto your first show?
Well, this is so the fighter there is Manea. So
Yep.
Manea started training with me a few years before this, and she'd never done any martial arts before. So she came in really overweight, unfit. She'd never done martial arts before, and she ended up wanting to become a Muay Thai fighter. And I said at that time I was running all the classes myself, and I wasn't training fighters or anything. So I actually recommended that she'd go to Saenchai and train with Tao.
Yep.
Which she did. A few months before this show, she ended up coming back to us. Like, she kept training with us all along. She used to do her boxing with me, and she'd do some training with Ton, who's the other person holding the rope.
Yep.
So she'd had a few fights under Saenchai, and this was her first fight for us. So I've got a real special relationship with Manea. So I remember watching her first fight at Britforce, and I was nervous as hell. I got real emotional. And then this fight, it was my first show. It was the first people I'd ever flown out for a fight. So there was Barasa Muay Thai. And yeah, I was obviously the show nerves, but having Manea fighting first time for us, I wanted to do well because I knew how important it was for her to do it. And, it was pretty special. It was one of the few times we've had our own fighters on the show. And it was pretty special. There was Manea because she was there from almost the beginning of what was Kaizen Fitness back then. And then obviously I had Pon there, who's one of the people that inspired Rebellion. So it was pretty cool.
Do you think the nerves of running your first show and having your first fighter on that show as well kind of balanced things out?
Yeah, by that stage of the night, I was pretty relaxed.
It was about halfway too.
Yeah. So she was one of the I think it was 11 fights, and I think this would have been fight number 7 or something. So
you would have thought years later you'd have about 17,
relaxed.
18 fights.
Yeah. And that was, I was just that night, the fact that the night started, there was a ring that could fit in there, and there was people there to watch it, was pretty much it going rid of most of my nerves. I think it started off better than I could have ever imagined. And then by the stage that fight came through, I think I was just focused on Manea and the fight at that point.
Yeah. And also, since Ton's in the photo, it was very cool how he was doing his traditional white career at the start. Was that his idea or was that your idea?
No, I asked him. And it was one of those things where it's such a Ton thing because you can ask, Ton's not a very showy person. He'll never talk himself up. He's probably one of the most underrated, unknown people in Muay Thai in Victoria. If you've kicked pads with him or you've clinched with him, he's an absolute ninja. But if you don't know anything else, it's just, you wouldn't know who he is.
It's one of the most
and then I asked, yeah, right. And it's there's probably people with 1/100th of the knowledge and experience and ability that he has in Muay Thai that big themselves up so much, whereas he doesn't. And it took, and then me asking him to do that, I wasn't sure how he'd react. And it's just such a Ton thing because if he knows it's important to me, he'll do it. And he was like, "Yep, no worries." And he wrapped his hands in the Muay Baran sort of traditional resin rope, and he did such a beautiful job. It's one of those things. I almost wish I kept doing it at every show.
I was hoping for that. Every show I go to, I keep hoping there's some traditional aspect that comes out of it. The closest thing that came out of it was when you had the 8-man white crew, and that was the first and last time I saw something like that.
Yeah, it's hard. I keep trying. I try to do some of those things. It's like when we tried to do the flowers before the fights on one of the
That
shows.
lasted for about
And
2 fights.
Yeah, he worked in the 8-man, but then it's like one of those things. I think you got to. I almost wish I'd started that right at the start because people don't know it and expect it. And later on in this, I think we're all like you, me, the camera guys, and John the Macaulay are in such a groove with all of this that when it's a new element, it's almost like we feel awkward about it.
Yeah.
And I also realized some of the fighters, it's their first time being in Rebellion. Like we're used to, but for some people, it's such a big deal being in Rebellion, and they're nervous as shit standing there.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's like, all right, come to the center. And I don't know, part of it too. I think like when I was doing that 8-man, and I was putting them around all the fighters, I kind of. And everyone's like, this is normal. This is what promoters do. And I was like, I feel like a phony almost doing it. It was just kind of like, I respect Muay Thai culture, but I also, I've got a couple of pendants that people have given me as gifts and stuff, but I don't want to overdo that from my side of it. So I don't know. It's something like maybe after this is all done, I'll get some tattoos and stuff and change my name or do something.
Speaking of the formalities, I love how our team, not being biased or anything, I love how our team at the show works well together. Going from John the Macaulay to the camera crew, we know what's happening. When arms are raised, we get that group shot and then they exit the ring. There's no fluffing about. When I travel interstate for other shows, oftentimes it's a different crew every time, so they won't know what's going on. And all those minutes count to what time the last fight will finish. Everyone has a role to do. As ring girls, the announcers, the ring boys, getting people in and out of the ring. It all really adds up.
You think about someone like John Kappa, who
he's on cue all the time.
He comes to Rebellion, and basically all he does is help with the ring girls. Or think about Jesse, who had just CI, who'd never had anything to do with Muay Thai before, and now he's like our DJ. It's like people get into those roles so well, and it's like even some of the guys who've started to volunteer the last 2 or 3 shows, they get it. It's like it's amazing. Sometimes you kind of go, you could I don't think I could actually ever sit there for the whole show, but you almost feel like you could just sit there and you wouldn't have to think twice about it.
Well, that's the thing, because I'm normally sitting in a one spot for 6-7 hours, and I see everyone doing the parts. It's almost in sync, whereas you are just running around backstage in a ring everywhere.
Yeah. I guess the trick for us is that at the end of the day, as far as the people in the crowd are and as far as the fighters are, that should feel like it's the most finely grooved thing in the world. And for me, it doesn't matter how much I stress on that night, the people in the audience shouldn't ever notice anything.
No.
It's almost like a good referee in like boxing. It shouldn't be about them. It should be about the show. And if everything else is like finely tuned, people shouldn't even notice it until they try to do a show and then they notice it themselves.
Definitely. Speaking of you running around like crazy during the nights, every now and then I might catch a glimpse of you sitting by yourself, getting some quiet time. I think this was the daytime show at Roots, maybe half an hour before doors open. After all the yelling and advices, what were you thinking about when you're just sitting there by yourself?
I'm not sure if this is when we had a light shutout or it's before the show. It's probably before the show.
Yep.
It's one of the things I think I've started to try to make myself do a little bit is to just step back, sit down and go, look at it and go, it's good. It's ready to go. Because sometimes you're just running from point to point to point to point. And it's like anything. I think you just got to step back and sit there. And I think this is one of the spots in the room where you can just got to sit back and you can see the whole room, the bars, the ring, the lighting, everything is set up and it's ready to go.
Yep.
Sometimes do though. What I think it's important. It's like, if you've ever been there before the doors open, I'm borderline psychotic.
It's almost like the calm before the storm as well. There's that quiet moment.
Yeah. And it's this point, I think if you look in the background, you can see the water jugs are full. That's one of the that's one of the last things that gets done, right? Because we have to have free water at all the bars and stuff. Like the chairs are all numbered. You can see the guys like Pete and stuff have gone numbered all the chairs, the bar's ready. It's literally like, I mean, now I'm looking at the seats are a little bit crooked, which is annoying, but everything's kind of ready. And it's like, all right, well, you need that 5 minutes of looking at it and going, yeah, it's all ready to go. Take a deep breath. Okay, now everything that happens from this point out to an extent is the exciting part of it, of the unknown of what kind of a walk up, or we're going to get to the doors, how the fight's going to go. All that stuff's the exciting part of it. All this other stuff's the stuff that I can control, and there's a large part of it that you can control during the show. But from this point on, it's there's a lot of other people that can touch what happens.
That's a very good point. I didn't notice the part about the water and all the labels. I mean, that's a testament to the team you've selected to do all this, fix up all the moving parts. The dream team. Every now and then when we have interstate fighters coming down, I notice you're often selected to be part of the corner, or if the trainer can't come down, you're the main cornerman. What's it like being asked to be the cornerman of some big interstate fighters, or just being in a corner like that with Blair and Nugget?
Look, I mean, this one in particular was, it's hard because I think this was Leo versus Corey Barrett. And despite what like the running joke might be, Corey's one of my like favorite people in Muay Thai. And I used to kind of feel funny about cornering against people as far as getting over my emotion of it. Like I've cornered against Chris Harrington, Alexi, Chris Bradford, Corey, Indigo. I've cornered against a lot of people because I've been asked to do it. And then I kind of realized my relationship with Billy, it's not a I'm picking sides kind of thing. It's like there's two fighters in the ring and they want the best. Yeah, and there's two fighters in the ring wanting the best opportunity. And I think Blair was one of the first people ever to ask me to help him in the corner. There was they'd fought on the Rebellion 2 with Roy, and then he brought out Sam Ballantyne to fight Jared Grigor for a WBC Australian title on Brute Force, and he asked me to jump in the corner with him. And like Blair's, I don't like see him as much as I used to, but he's probably one of my best Muay Thai friends and one of my people I like the most in this world. So if he ever asks, I'd never say no. And he usually, if he's got a fighter in Melbourne, I'll jump in. Even if I go to Perth and they've got guys, a lot of guys, I'll always try to help out wherever I can with rapping or whatever else, whatever they ask.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've got a shit ton of respect for Nugget. I talk to him and have in the past a lot and asked for a lot of advice and stuff. So being asked to be in like with those two guys was pretty cool. And it's like when I'm in there, like I almost feel like I could be cornering against my best friend or a family member, but I take that role pretty seriously, and I don't like mix my emotions or have a side thing with it. Like I try to do the best I can. Sometimes I get a bit carried away, but it's pretty good. I think that night, like the three of us was a pretty cool little corner. So,
this is dream team, man.
I get it. Yeah.
If you are by
there's the two guys who know a lot about Muay Thai, and then me and there who's just very good at yelling.
If you are cornering by yourself for one of Blair's fighters and he's not there, do you try and corner the way Blair would? Would you try and corner the way you would, or just say what you need to say to the fighter themselves?
Usually, if they ever send someone, they'll kind of tell me some things. But I mean, my personality and Blair's is very, very different. I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago, like my energy was a lot more like probably Blair's, whereas I think now I'm a lot calmer in the corner. But I try to think what they're like. Most of these guys, I've been pretty close to their corners when they've been there with Blair or whoever else is there. And I know the kind of stuff Blair will want them to do. And I try to do that. Like, I'm not going to ever, no, don't worry about that. I've got some ideas. I kind of try to think about what it is Blair would want me to say and do it. And like in a situation like that, I think I kind of keeping an ear out on what Nugget's saying, keeping an eye on what Blair's saying. I kind of repeat clearly what I can get out of both those guys. And that's about it. But if those guys aren't there, I just try to give the best advice that I can see at the time and think about the style of the gym they come from. Like if I've got someone from Blair's gym over there, I'm not going to be trying to tell them to walk backwards and counter fight, where I know that that's not the style Blair wants and that's not the style the guys are doing. I've had some challenging ones. I've done ones where the guys have come in and I've had a couple where the Thai trainers come with them. And also I've been asked to go and help. And then the Thai trainers have just turned around to me and gone, just give it to the guy, because they've got a different relationship. Whereas they know if the other trainer was there, they'd go apeshit. So I know that's what they want me to do. So I'll get pretty direct.
Also see it as a great learning experience, you being that close to these two superstar trainers, hearing their advice, seeing how they react during a fight, and also in the corners. I'm sure there's parts of that you could bring to your own fighters when it's your time.
Yeah. And it's Nugget's one of those, he jokes about the crystal ball thing, but he's pretty sort of accurate with it. I was telling him once, I remember on an old Evo, I don't know who they were fighting. It was one of the Queensland gyms. And the camera's gone to Nugget's corner, and Nugget's gone, I think he was talking to Daddy Cool. He goes, I bet you they're telling that boy, throw 1-2 step up left knee. When he does that, I want you to do this, do this, do this. The camera switches over to the other side, and the trainer's saying exactly the same thing. Nugget knows what's going on. And even I think before the fights, he's got a lot more fight strategy of the actual fight. Whereas a lot of trainers, I think they kind of just put the fight in. They've got a rough idea and adjust. Whereas I think Nugget sees it a lot beforehand.
Yeah.
Blair is very, very direct with stuff, and he's got very good, simple things. And I think the other person I've learned the most has been Riddler. Yeah. So I think Riddler's calmness, Nugget's sort of pre-planning, and then Blair's, sometimes it's just basic, simple stuff. And I think a lot of trainers will tell you, it's you can give people really, I hear it all the time, super complicated instructions. Whereas sometimes it's just you just have to kick more. And it's throw your, and some of the most successful stuff has been, it's not particularly tricky, but I think you sometimes hear really inexperienced trainers being super duper complicated in the back and in the corner. And then you hear the most advanced guys being very, very basic in their instructions, which if you think about the scenario, that makes the most sense. And then they're chaining basic things and strategies together. So I think that's what I've learned out of those two guys there. And then Riddler just being near his corner a lot at Rebellion.
Yeah, that's awesome. Going back to what you said, how it's like business at the end of the day. You can corner against your friends, and then next week it can be the reverse. I notice after every show or after every fight, you go up to both corners, you thank them, whether they've won or lost. You always seem to have something encouraging to say to the corners and the fighters. What goes through your mind after the fight, whether with someone who's won and someone who's lost?
It's hard because I could be wrong, but I feel like I've got a big relationship with most of the fighters. I talk to them on Facebook. I talk to them at the shows. I joke around.
Yeah.
I kind of get to know them a lot. And it's just I don't have it. I'm a promoter up here. You're a fighter. You're down here, or vice versa. And I think I know how important fights are for the guys. So
I think as a fighter, it's very comforting having the promoter come to you, whether you won or lost, just seeing them, getting thanks, saying, yes, I fought in your promotion. Thanks for having me there.
Yeah. And it's they're either extremely happy or disappointed, or somewhere in between that. And I think it's just, if they've done really well, congratulating them. And if they haven't, acknowledging their effort. And it was a thing I read years ago that was about fathers and sons and stuff. It was saying that one of the nicest things you can tell your kids is I love watching you play. And it's like, I think for a lot of these guys, the guys that I have on Rebellion, whether they win or lose, by and large, I love watching them fight. And I just want them to know that. And I've had so many fighters after they lose say, I'm so sorry, so I'm sorry. I hope I didn't disappoint you. And I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, the fight is, you were part of that fight. You might have won, you might have lost, but I love watching you fight. Like, and I do. And if I didn't, I wouldn't put them on. And it's one of the things I say to a lot of the fighters is like, man, I love watching you fight. That was such a great fight, because I want them to know that, because like this disappointment of the loss is enough. They don't need anything else. And also, you know, they're just like, if one of the guys from the gym was fighting afterwards, I'd want to have some connection with them.
Yeah. And
I like most of these guys, they're like, you know, the Tuck's over there, he's fought on. I can't really think of too many gyms or too many fighters I don't have a good bond with. And it's like, well, it's an emotional experience for all of us, and it's hard not to get involved.
Yeah. I mean, you've had a few guys from Asker fighting on routes too, and a few of them have come to speak to me saying that, you know, Sy came out to speak with me after the fight, and just that little talk just meant a lot to them too, you know, being acknowledged by the promoter themselves. And one thing I've learned from you too is, especially being in my role, it's, you can't be too biased with what you do. You got to treat both corners with the same amount of respect. And that's one thing you do very well, especially on your show. No matter if someone wins by crazy TKO, you're never too over the moon. The first thing you do is make sure the other person's okay. You don't want anyone to get too seriously hurt at your show.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's honestly, that's the hardest thing, and some of the worst parts of promoting have been when guys have got proper clear knockout or got that I thought was hurt. Like when Singh beat Danapo, I was happy for Singh, but I always remember Andy and I have this thing. It's like, oh, you didn't look that happy. I'm like, man, I spent 3 days with Danapo and his trainer and stuff, and then he just looks hurt. I'm not going to jump up and down. Like when Jono got lost against Wade, I was devastated for him. When Yakub the second time he lost to Toby, not even the physical hurt, the emotional letdown that he had. Like Blair was like, you love him. He's your boy. I was like, dude, I spoke to Yakub today on the like 2 years later. I genuinely like that guy, and I know how big a thing he was for him. And of course, it's good for Toby to win, but it's like, it's important. Like it's hard to see them lose. And the other part of it is, my big thing for Rebellion from day one was for it to be just. So I tried to make sure that officials don't play favorites, the commentators don't play favorites. The way we do stuff and promote them, it's not we're playing favorites, because I feel like the fighters shouldn't, and I'm sure it's happened and we know that it's happened, but they shouldn't feel like there's been injustice, because I think it should be as honest as you can get it, and they should get in there. And as long as they've done the work and they get in there, they should have that same opportunity to win. And that should come from the way I treat them, right up to the way you put up their photos, to the way the commentators call them, to the way they're treated in the background. No one should feel like they're they're the second class B-side. So if they're flying in, I want them to not feel like they had to like sit in a shitty bus all the way from the airport, or they went and had a bad place. I want them to be, it's like, okay, it's fair. You're here, it's fair. And the way I treat them, I want it to be, it's fair. Yeah, you're fighting the guy from Australia, the main man, but you know, we're respecting him.
That's perfect. That's really well said. Sy as the martial artist.
Oof.
Now you brought over some big names for seminars over the last few years, and this was one of the first big seminars I've been to, and you were lucky to let me just come in, take some photos, and I was learning as he was teaching. I don't know if you remember what happened here. You were asked to demonstrate one of Saenchai's famous jumping front kicks, and on both occasions leg kicks. Both occasions it landed right on his groin, and he wasn't wearing.
There was 3. 2 of them didn't land anywhere, and he acted the same on all of them. So I think it's his little shtick that he does. One of them did land. One did land. I know one landed, but there
Yeah.
was another one that didn't land.
What's it like meeting a legend like that and having them come into your gym?
It's crazy. Like he came in and he came with Matthew Dean,
Yes.
and he was sitting in the office at Kaizen, and we were talking about it. And he goes, "Oh, he bring him out to fight on your show." I'm like, "Okay." And I'm like, "Who does he want to fight?" And he'd been at the Tomahawk versus Ponsane fight on CMT. So he goes, "Oh, he wants to fight Tomahawk. Bring him. He wants to fight Tomahawk." And I actually tried to make that fight happen because the next big show after this was the first
Road?
8-man eliminator
Okay.
that we did at FitX. They agreed to they said, "Yep, he's available." And then I called up Daniel Bell and said, "Is Tomahawk available?" They're like, "Yeah, he should be available." We agree. He goes, "Oh, but he wants this much money." And I'd already stupidly, I wasn't even thinking numbers back then or now. So I said, "Yep, cool, do it." And he goes, "I will have to confirm." And Total Carnage ended up being the week after. And Tomahawk wouldn't be able to do it because he had a commitment to be on Total Carnage because I think they were moving the dates around. And in hindsight, considering how much money I lost on that show, it was probably good that I didn't end up spending another $20-something thousand on that fight. But then I don't know, man. I think it was such a great cover. I think if we had Saenchai versus Tomahawk as the main event, it would have been a super sellout.
It's a fight that
But yeah, it's crazy. Like, Saenchai, we had Sayok,
yes.
and I really like Sayok because he was such a bad motherfucker. Obviously, we've had Mr. Knock, and then I think my favorite seminar so far of the Muay Thai trainers was Lamnamun last year.
That was a big turnout too.
Yeah, that was, I think, the busiest Muay Thai seminar. It was oversold. But I think that's I put that on my my Instagram a little while ago. I feel like I'm like a fanboy disguised as a promoter. Like, I don't know what it is about Yotkunpon. I love that dude. And when he fought George Mann on the show, from the minute I picked him up, it was like kind of hanging out with this girl you kind of like, but you're both shy to make a move.
Yeah.
And it was like, when he came into the ring, I was like proper giddy. And after the fight, he started speaking English to me and he's like, "Oh, thank you very much." And so I was just like, hey, yeah. It's like Saenchai fought on the show. And the Saenchai fight was ridiculous because by the time he got in the ring, I'd lost this pendant that I'd gotten from my dad because I'd been jumping around so much.
Yeah.
So I didn't watch the fight. I'm running around the room trying to find this pendant. And it got to the point where I was about to basically say to John O'Arman, "Tell everyone the fight stopped, turn the music off, the screen's not letting anyone out. It's probably worth actually $10, but it's worth a lot to me. There's going to be no fighting until we find this pendant." And it's funny, I'm running around the room and I remember running towards Rob, who was DJing, and I looked over my shoulder. I'm like, "Oh shit, Saenchai's fighting on my show. I should probably watch this." It's like so cool. And it's like, there's these guys that you go, it's the good thing about Muay Thai. It's like, it's quite accessible, but I love that. It's just kind of like, I just go to the airport and pick up Mr. Knock and then go hang out there, or have Wayne Parr at the show, or have a phone call with Daddy Cool. It's just bizarre, but it's cool.
Nice one. And then brings us to our last photo.
Yay.
Benny's famous head kick knockout heard all over FitX.
Yeah. That was a really cool one.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know. I think we might have been coming off I'm not sure if we're coming off a loss on that one. And that was a pretty stressful show. The funny thing about this show is I actually DJ'd part of it because we didn't have a DJ. And
where was Rob?
I was putting people's walkouts on. I don't know where he was. So Rob couldn't do it. And I had a couple of guys from the gym that I basically said, "These are the songs you play in between this is the song he played there. And I was standing next to where the fighters walked out, getting people out. And it was actually like, so many people loved this show. The energy for a smallish crowd was so good because we had the 4-man.
Yeah.
And then Benny was still sort of fighting back then, and he fought Cam Webb from PTJ Muay Thai. And it was like 2 or 3 shows into the bromance that's developed between me and Andrew.
This was the first time when you had the State of Origins too, Victoria versus New South Wales. I was saying to Ben the other day, I remember hearing the corner, either you or Jayed saying head kick, and that was the first time I was listening to the corner. So I was looking for the head kick, and then bam, it landed.
He came. It was funny. Jayed and I, like, would butt heads on so many things, but in the corner, it's like beautiful symphony of stupidity. And he's a really like clever dude as far as strategy and stuff goes. And I think he's one of those guys that he sees stuff like, I think I'm not a strategic genius, but if somebody's hurt or somebody's open or someone's doing something, I notice it. And I think it's from like teaching so many classes all the time. You see someone's habits, and I see it in the corner. I think Jayed's the same. And we both could see it. And Benny came in the corner, and we literally went, throw a right hand down to the body. It was just the way I think Cam was reacting, and then just fucking head kick him. And the round started, and I think Jayed was kind of like, he would kind of like egg me on to second. My voice is so clear. And he threw the right body. Like Benny did it exactly right. He just threw it down, and we're like, head kick. And he's just gone bang. And I think me and Jayed and Ton jumped up in the air. Peter's show, he was at that second, would come and set up, and he'd watch the show. He's like hit the roof from excitement. And then we went from celebration to, oh shit, it's our mate Cam, in the space of like 2 seconds. Like I think we hardly even celebrated. We just went, oh, and I was like, oh shit, it's Cam. It's Andy's boys. And yeah, it was really good. And like, you can see we're like stoked.
Yeah.
Also, like, we're not losing our shit. It was like,
I mean, it's hard not to. At least you came to your senses very early on and said, no, we got to make sure the other guy's okay first before we start cheering.
Yeah, because it was like a shotgun knockout, like bang, and he's out. It's one of the, and it would have been, I reckon it was one of the, I think this is what is a Rebellion 7 or 8.
7.
And I think he's one of the 7. And I think it would have been one of the first stoppages on Rebellion. I think the first 4 or 5.
And first head kick
feel
as
like
well.
We didn't have any. Yeah, and it was just so clean. For the people who've never been right up on the ring canvas when a fight's going on, the sounds and stuff are so much more real. Like when you hear things land, you really hear them land.
Yeah.
And it was just like, shit, it's Cam. And we just like jumped in straight away.
Also with Rebellion 7, it was also one of the first times where there was a really, really bloody fight with Alexi versus Brian.
Yeah. That was crazy. And that's the fight that I think, Brian decided that I think I was trying to apparently sabotage him. And he left me some threatening messages and stuff on my office phone. And then he tried to get other people to apologize for it. Yeah, he got cut up. The doctors normally had adrenaline. I think they didn't get enough adrenaline into the corner. And Phil Bennett was doing his best to try to sort Brian up. But also Brian can get a little bit hyperactive. And I think it doesn't help when you're trying to stop bleeding when someone's just like frothing at the mouth. Yeah, that was a really bloody fight. And then there was the main event, that's Foy versus Reece Saliba. That was,
I mean, the lights went out. The lights went out halfway through the show, but no one really cared. I didn't even care that the lights went out. It was such a great fight from start to finish.
Well, the thing was, we weren't in charge of the lighting or anything. The expo were, and the lights went off, and kind of Paris was kind of there, and I just went, I can't do anything about it. I don't even know who these people are. And I actually ended up going and sitting ringside with Anastasia and Sylvia. It was, I think, one of the first times where I just went, I can't do anything about this. I'm just going to enjoy the rest of the fights now. And then
Why not?
Nina, Nina, who I became good friends with, who used to work for FedEx, and then she ended up working for me at William Street Gym for a while. I remember she was wearing this black dress, long black dress. I called and I said, Nina, the lighting's gone off. She ran in and she crawled under the ring, and I think she got the lights back on, and I was just like, God, she's going above and beyond. But yeah, that was a really good card. There was more interstaters on that card than there was Victorians. There's a 4-man, didn't have any Victorians in it. And we had Foy, Kim Johnson, Reece Saliba, and Millard on it. Then we had the New South Wales versus Victoria. Yeah,
nice.
Big card. It was really good. Good fun.
Cool. Well, that brings us to the last photo. Thank you for your time, my man.
No worries, Mr. Will.
Hopefully you had fun doing this.
As always. I did. Down memory lane. I was so young. Had so much hair.